Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Emma. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something more important and urgent, about how traditional ways of leading had changed forever.
We make it our mission to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, covering topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and resilience, and from climate change to AI. If it's about the status of leadership in 2025, we will change that for 2026. It will be on our podcast.
We're not here for the shiny corporate case studies. We share stories from leaders who have learned lessons and made progress the hard way. And our podcast is here to share ideas and inspire others.
And in this episode, we'll be sharing our conversation, a belated conversation with Ali Poole, who's the lead product manager at Flo Health. Ali oversees Flo's chatbot development, content platforms, and AI product teams, and she shares her insight with us on how leaders can create the best conditions for innovation in their teams.
Before we get to our chat with Ali, this will be the last episode of Starts at the Top until the new year. So, Paul and I are in a reflective mood and we want to share a few thoughts on 2025, the year that was, and what this year might tell us about what we can expect in 2026.
Yeah, so this time of year, I get a bit obsessed with looking back. I think it's fueled by all of the Spotify Wrapped and Apple Replay, which we wait for in our house. I was discussing yesterday how I was quite grateful that LinkedIn doesn't do a similar thing, because that would just be truly awful to have a look back over how much you've put out on LinkedIn across the course of the year and how much time you've spent there. But I think it's nice to look at that in a work context, but also things that we've got excited by personally in 2025. And I think we should probably kick off this little bit of a discussion with the fact that we got to do some work together, which is lovely. Happens every couple of years, like the Olympics, every 4 years, Zoe and Paul get to work with each other. And it was lovely. It feels like it was the very last throes of the summer, and in September in Richmond Park. And it was our Navigating AI Transformation Leadership Walk with James and Anni. It was a great day, and we brought lots of charity leaders and non-charity leaders to talk about where they were getting to with AI. And I think it was a wonderful day that we're going to repeat in the new year, Zoe.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. There was a lot of interest in this session, and we are going to run it again because there was so much interest in April 2026. Date to be announced soon. So please do sign up as soon as tickets go on sale, and we will be launching that imminently. I suspect it will be January, just based on how busy people are at this time of year. And we're really excited to see where leaders are at with AI when we get to the spring. And of course, that will be a big topic of discussion as we share our episodes in 2026.
Yeah, so staying on AI for a bit, because it's been a huge topic for us over the course of the year. And as you say, will continue to be so in next year. I think if I had to reflect on the year overall, though, it's been a dominant part of the conversation. But it does feel like it's been a conversation. It feels like we're sort of edging towards a point where people now, going into 2026, really need to start to take some action and do some stuff with AI, because we have done a lot of talking in rooms, a lot of talking online, a lot of experimentation, and a lot of things are kicking off. But it just feels to me that next year is an opportunity to really take a grip on this, and that's certainly something I'll be putting forwards as a message with my business over the course of the first few months of 2026. How about you, Zoe?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously something we're quite deep into now in our organisation and with the work that we do. I think 2026 is going to be characterised by a number of different things in AI. So the first thing is we're obviously seeing a lot of vendors, a lot of suppliers bringing many more products to market now. And one of the trends I'm slightly concerned by is that I think we are going to see a bit of a focus on solutionizing. I was in a room recently with some charities and a supplier where there was a big focus on this exciting new product. And I had some concerns that the product wasn't ethical. So I do think we're going to see quite a lot of that, because I do think there will be pressure on tech teams to show the return on investment from AI, and there will be a big push to move fast, demonstrate that you're getting value. But of course, your cornerstone's got to be, am I really acting with and also acting in the interest of the communities we serve? So this is why I think the pace of adoption in the charity sector is going to be very different. The second trend that I'm seeing is that boards are going to be using AI a lot more as a thinking partner. So I was speaking at an event where there was a really interesting discussion about that a few weeks ago. Obviously, the big thing there is about data protection, changes in ways of working to essentially the trustee workforce. And I wonder whether we'll see something in parallel with boards of commercial organizations. It was interesting because I read an article from McKinsey the other week, and I'll pop it in the show notes, where I always thought that the charity sector was a bit behind in terms of AI and digital skills on boards, because we've seen that gap in the digital skills report. But it turns out that corporate boards are also lacking in AI skills. And if McKinsey says it's a problem as well, then we are all in good company. So that, I think, is going to be a big issue in 2026. How can we make sure that boards have the right skills, the right ways of working to make really responsible, really good, sound, robust decisions with the right evidence base when things are moving at a pace that's only going to get quicker next year?
No, and I'm glad you said that, because in two separate conversations with two separate firms in the course of the last month, we've brought it back to strategy and away from tools. And I think the partners in these organizations are looking at the plethora of stuff on the market. They're being bombarded by the market as well. So they're having people come in and say, use our tool for productivity, use our tool for this, that, and the other. These are organizations that historically probably need to have a more focused outlook on what the next 2 to 3 years look like for them as a business. There's so much happening in the market, so much decision making being driven by technology, that they've said, Paul, we want to stop. We want to think about strategy. We want to think about culture. And for my money, that means leaning into skills development and training. And so the first part of next year being, right, stop talking. Let's get your people in a room. Let's get them trained up on how to use the tools. Let's give them the skills that they need to go back to their desks and start to make some sensible decisions about how they take their own roles forwards within your organization, rather than what I think has been the case over the course of 2025 has been more discussion about how AI is going to impact organizations generally. Seeing it from the employee point of view, I think, is going to be really, really important. And as such, a second trend that I think will come in and support this is there's been a huge amount of job loss and redundancy in 2025. And often in the corporate world, some of the first positions to go are around internal communications. And I think in the accountancy world, there's a real challenge in mid-tier firms who see internal communications as a top-down job from partner to employee, and that there often isn't structured communications within the firm. And I think with everything that's going on around technology and AI, everything that's going on around private equity in the market, everything that's going on around ESG and finding the best employees to come in and keeping your employees with you, internal communication is going to be a trend that we're going to be backing in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you've got any kind of change program, right? The organization needs to really shape and also own that narrative around change and see positive reinforcement of the change. And it's such an underrated element of any kind of organizational evolution. As you say, it's sometimes the thing that people forget. And hopefully that will then fuel what we were talking about earlier, which is that conversation about AI and change happening at the right level. Because I think my slight concern, based on what you were talking about, the trends that you're seeing, is it's really easy to push it down a level, isn't it, as a leader? So you push it down as an operational, tactical thing. You say, we'll focus on skilling. And yes, of course, skilling is important. We'll focus on procurement. And yes, of course, procurement is important. But if you're not really getting a grip on the brief around AI and how that's fundamentally going to change what you do at the top table, then you are going to lose control. You aren't going to be able to factor it into your strategy adequately. And that's the thing. Some of the decisions that leaders and boards are going to be making now about AI will have generational consequences, particularly when we think about competitive advantage, consequences for the communities that charities support. So that is on my wish list for 2026, that they lead that conversation and that they really have the confidence to do that.
And bring in AI to help with those decisions and that
Yeah.
that 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 discussion as well.
Mm.
Because I've found when I've presented stuff, I've almost had to apologize and say, by the way, I am going to be using an AI tool to be able to present some of this information back to you, but taking them through the rationale and delivering that means that they start to see it in a very different way to just bringing vendors in to do a sort of a show and tell on what their tool can achieve. So that's the business side of things, and then also sort of more generally, I think everyone's found this year to be quite exhausting. It's been quite tough, as we said, rounds of redundancies and things like that. So we all have to have our coping mechanisms, and I think we have to think about the good moments within the difficult times. So just for me, just a couple of personal reflections. I finished a great big project up in April,
Oh,
and
well
then
done.
following that, collapsed basically into a big heap in a nice cabin in the woods in Wales, and had a digital detox for a few days, which is something I do want to repeat in 2026. So that's my commitment to myself to do that, to reward good work with going away and getting lost in the woods and doing great big walks. Climbed Snowdon, that's got to be a highlight. And then ending the year on a real positive with a real sense of focus going into 2026, which I think may have been lacking in the latter part of the year. So I'm pleased to see that come back and on a personal note, go into 2026 with some drive and enthusiasm. Not that I want the Christmas period to go quickly, but really want to get to the other side of it too, and go into the new year with a new vigor and purpose. How about you?
Yeah, well, it's been a really full on. Yeah, I mean, we've been very lucky. It's actually been our busiest ever year, and a lot of that has been driven by AI, and that also reinvigorating quite a lot of activity around digital as well. I think the thing I'm most proud of is starting the charity AI task force with Dan Such. We've made some good progress this year. I can't say too much about some of the exciting developments behind the scene, but we will be sharing more about that early in the new year, probably around February time. So there's some exciting things that are happening there. Um, and really, I think that where that has fueled the rest of my inspiration around ethical and responsible AI adoption, which is obviously a big cornerstone of what we now do, is that, as you said, Paul, I think there's something about energy, right? There's such a lot of really difficult things going on in the world right now. The sector's in a really challenging place. So, my way of navigating that has been to navigate towards where there is good energy, where there is drive, there is momentum, um, even if that's coming from a place of we've got nothing to lose. We're just going to try this because this is really about survival. Um, and there's an amazing client I'm working with at the moment. I can't say too much about who they are and what we're doing with them. But earlier in the new year, I was having a meeting and they're talking about some big changes they want to see in their organization. And my main contact there was going, I am I'm going to do anything to make this happen. I'm willing to kick a door down. And I thought, this is just brilliant. I am here for this energy because however bad things get, however challenging they are, if you can really hold on to that thing of, I am going to push to make this happen, that is the thing that will really see you through some really tough times. So that's what I'm going to be channeling into 2026, more of that kick a door down energy.
But you be careful with those feet, because we were just talking before we came on about running as well being a massively important part of our 2025 and 2026 to both of us. So you need to keep good care of those feet. And just a very, very throwaway thing. Listeners of this podcast, long-term listeners, will know how important music is to both of us. And I saw you sharing your top artists month by month on Instagram. What's your biggest music revelation or your biggest music love from 2025 that you'd like to share?
Well, according to my Apple Music replay, the main thing I've listened to this year is Barry Can't Swim. I've just been obsessed about, especially Barry Can't Swim's new album that came out in July. Please, please, can he announce his tour dates? Come on, Barry, where are you? I need to see Barry live. So that is another of my things, 2026. Also, loved the Baxter Dury album. I think it was absolutely phenomenal. And then the album I listened most to this year, as you all know, and I think you're a big fan of it, was the Self Esteem album. And I had
Mm.
the pleasure of seeing her in Sheffield in October, and she was just amazing, absolutely amazing. So that was my gig of the year.
Nice, nice. Well, earlier in the year, again, that we do things together from time to time. We went to see Kelly Lee
We do.
Owens, so that was all a big highlight. So
Oh, that was
that
great.
that
I
that was a
loved that.
lot. I think a lot of my first part of the year, that and Marie Davidson, was a lot of like
Mm,
quite hard dance music, EDM music that I quite enjoyed. And then towards the end of the year, I started really flexing my old sort of heavy metal and rock muscles. So I've listened to so much Deftones, it's unbelievable. My all time favorite artist is a guy called Jeff Tweedy who fronts a band called Wilco. He put out a 30-track album that I just
blimey.
got the vinyl of the other day finally. So that's probably one of the albums I've listened to the most. And then a guy called Cass McCombs as well. He was my most played artist on Apple Music, but then the album is about 80 minutes long. So I'm not sure whether I've listened to him more than anything else or the album more. Um, but I think the other one that I just want to big shout out to is a band called Caroline, which is a London based band, and they put out a second album this year, which I think overall is my favourite album of the year and one that I keep coming back to time and time again. So I'd highly recommend you go out and listen to that. We will maybe put some of that in the show notes so people can go off and discover it for themselves.
Amazing.
Anyway, wrapping up 2025 then with our conversation with Ali Poole. So over to Ali.
I am so excited to welcome Ali Poole to Starts at the Top. Ali is the lead product manager for Chatbots and Generative AI at the Flo Health app. And for those of you who haven't come across Flo, it's the world's number one women's health app, where over 420 million people across the globe use the app to track their periods, ovulation, and pregnancy. I've known Ali for a long time, and she's also worked at Bupa, Cancer Research UK, as well as many other organisations that we're going to hear about. And she's a speaker in product, health tech, and femtech. Ali, we're so pleased to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm really thrilled to be here, and great to do this finally. And I know, yeah, we've known each other a really long time through our careers as well. So it's just like, yeah, perfect opportunity to come on and speak to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I was so pleased when you got in touch on LinkedIn and said you wanted to come on, because I think we last met in when we first met was 2008, 2009. We were just saying before we started recording.
Yeah, and we both were in the charity sector in the early days and with the NFP tweet up community and doing lots of, yeah, really interesting things early on. It's been a, yeah, interesting journey on my side as well. So.
Absolutely. And all of that has culminated in this brilliant work that you're doing at Flow at the moment. And Flow has been such a pioneer in how it's using AI. And you're obviously leading some of that really exciting work. Can we start by you telling us a bit about how Flow is using AI?
Yeah, so basically started setting up the generative AI area over a year ago. And Flow is in a very kind of unique position that there is a very successful chatbot in place already. In fact, the Flow chatbot, which is known as the health assistant, is about 6.5 years old. And it's one of the most successful features on the apps. And it has, lots of self assessments you can do and informational chats. So as soon as the generative AI revolution started happening, it was a very logical discussion for us to have about what this was going to mean for our chatbot in particular. But like many other companies, we also thought, well, what can this mean for productivity as well? So I think there are two main areas that we're looking at Flow. One is the productivity side. So we are using generative AI more and more in our day to day, for product management, for engineers, for our content production, so that we're able to achieve a lot more scale with our content. And I think a lot more personalization for our content. I think there's a lot of capacity for more localization as well with all of this work. And then, of course, there's the Gen AI product work, which is the area that I'm also looking at. And that is how to create LLM-based products. So actually having a live large language model for our users to interact with. And that is something which is, again, it's in pretty early stage. It's on small experiments right now. It's not in any kind of large scale production because at Flow, we have a huge responsibility for our users for ensuring high level of medical safety, high level of data security, data privacy. So we have to make sure that whatever we eventually release into production is very, very safe indeed for people to use. So the approach that we're taking is going to be, it's quite, a lot longer in terms of feature development than we would normally have actually at Flow. But I think that we will, when we finally release it at a large scale, we'll have really high confidence that our users can feel absolute trust and safety when they interact with our LLM.
And that's so exciting. And what does success look like for you there? Imagine it's all out there in the open, it's been launched, it's been scaled. What would you like to see the LLM achieve?
So what I would love for this LLM to achieve would be to really help women to have better conversations with their healthcare providers. So I see that a lot of our users just really struggle with their confidence, with their awareness of symptoms, with their knowledge. And so, what I hope this is going to do is empower people with all of that information. It's kind of called health literacy in our sector. And so, what does that mean? It means that when you go to speak to your healthcare provider, when there's something's wrong with your cycle, you're able to advocate for yourself and that you'll be able to get that referral to an obstetrician and gynecologist and hopefully be able to then go down a pathway and get some treatment or some care, because too many times at the moment women are just ignored, like told to go away. People have to go about 10 times before they get taken seriously for PCOS at the moment. So I really think having an LLM that you can interact with, that knows all about women's health, is going to be really beneficial, and it can be a lot more personalized as well. And I think that's the thing, is that I know the pain of our current chatbot is very generic in a way because we have to build it for kind of a very large population. But with an LLM, we can have this much more personalized and nuanced experience. And I think that's going to be the thing, that if you are a Flow user right now and you feel slightly frustrated by our health system's lack of personalization, then this new feature that's going to be coming soon will be really helpful to you. So yeah, female health LLM is going to really empower them to have better conversations with their healthcare providers.
That's so brilliant because I remember when we spoke a few weeks back, we talked about how we all know women who have had really difficult experiences in the health system, right? So, like you were saying, they get brushed off, even though there's something they're really worried about in terms of their cycle or something else that's going on with their body. And it strikes me that you're trying to solve a health issue there, but it's also a social justice issue, isn't it? That women's needs don't always get taken as seriously as they could do by the health system.
There was a real lack of kind of education and awareness, with around the time that lots of many GPs were trained in the UK. So women's health wasn't something that was prioritized in like training, 20 years ago. For women who go to the doctor, one of the biggest problems is that many of our healthcare practitioners weren't trained on women's health very much, going back 20 years ago. And so there is a lack of awareness on GPs providers side, but also for many women, I think again, because we didn't have the best female health education when we were all growing up, that you've had to learn things as you went along. And I see so many users on Flow in our user interviews where their periods have always been that way. So they've never known that something was wrong. So if you've always had heavy menstrual bleeding and you've always had something like awful, like heavy blood clots, then you've never been triggered to ask, oh, is this normal for me? So flow helps to nudge you in that way to suddenly think, oh, maybe I should go and get checked out. Maybe I should go and have that conversation with my healthcare provider. But you have to really advocate for yourself at the moment, particularly when you're talking about, these extremely long NHS waiting lists, particularly when you're talking about chronic conditions as well. So trying to get yourself referred is quite a challenge in the UK, and it's definitely a challenge in the US for our US users as well.
I was just going to ask about your demographics, actually. You must have users across countries where healthcare is very limited, and therefore your app is even more of a lifeline to that audience. Do you know roughly what your demographics are?
I don't have the stats to hand, but Flow has a pro-social initiative as well. So we give away our app for free, our premium app for free across a huge number of countries. Originally, it was the Ukraine because we have a lot of people who work here from the affected areas of the war. And so we originally gave the app away to like about 1 million, I think, people in the Ukraine. And then following that, we started giving it away in other countries where healthcare systems are difficult. So there's a huge kind of pro-social initiative going on right now. But yeah, at the moment the app is localized into different languages, but obviously with the coming of generative AI, I think that there is a huge potential here. And I would absolutely love to see Flow localized by healthcare systems. I could imagine how wonderful it would be for you to get advice on a chatbot and then to be actually given information that would help you make a referral pathway, because a referral pathway in Spain is different to a referral pathway in the US or Brazil or Ukraine. So it would be amazing. And I think generative AI just has that capacity to have that kind of really highly personalized information delivered to you, which is so exciting.
Yeah, that is super exciting and really brilliant to hear how it could potentially take into account those regional differences. I think that is much needed. It's always really interesting when I talk to friends who live in other countries, how the healthcare system is different, how their childcare system is different. And you realise that the things, as you were saying earlier, actually, what you see as normal isn't necessarily everyone else's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah, when I was working at Bupa, I worked on a startup called Bupa On Demand, which was like a self-pay venture. And I remember it was quite interesting at the time because we were looking at what people needed to know to go into an appointment with a consultant. So if you're going to see an obstetrician and gynecologist, how can you make the most of your 30-minute conversation, and what should you go in prepared with? And that's for somebody who's paying for that appointment as well, because it's self-pay. And I've often thought about that kind of level of information because we were tailoring it to a very specific UK audience, and this is how our private healthcare system works in the UK. So I've often thought, well, what could that idea look like using generative AI? What would be your top 5 tips for talking to a consultant, given that you're in Spain or given that you're in the UK or the US?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm really interested in the way that you're running some of the external facing work, the kind of user facing work, alongside the internal work and that need to create efficiency, improve productivity. And I know we touched on that a bit when we spoke a few weeks back and how it's so important to keep those two things going hand in hand. So I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting at Flow because I think what we've taken is almost like a democratized approach to using generative AI in your day-to-day work. And there is not just one team, it's not just my team or HR or anybody who's advocating for the use of generative AI. It's absolutely all across the organization. So different product managers, different teams have all off their own back thought, how can generative AI improve my workflow? How can it create efficiencies? So It's quite amazing. We've tried to make kind of a group for product managers, content leads to kind of come together and discuss what they're doing because there are so many ways. So for product managers particularly, you can do things like you can use generative AI to create prototypes. You can make a test case generator. You could make a hypothesis generator. We have an amazing UXR platform at Flow where we fed in all of the reports of our UX research, and then you can chat with generative AI LLM and say, pull me out the top user pain points of our perimenopausal audience, for example. So many of the teams are using it in their day-to-day work, and particularly I think the kind of the content and the visual side of the organization using it to massively speed up and ramp up content production. So it should, I think, all of this work, and this is, I think, fairly common and a lot of organizations are thinking about this kind of aspect of generative AI. But it just means that I think for Flow, we're going to get a lot more done a lot quicker as a consequence.
That's so amazing. I love the way you've described that because it feels like there's something about collective leadership, collective ownership, and motivation to do more with
Yeah.
AI. How have you managed to get to that point as a business? It's really exciting.
I I think part of it is honestly the culture at Flow. I think a lot of people who come to Flow are quite entrepreneurial. We see lots of people who are hired at Flow who were like have founded their own startup, for instance, and come here. So there's a lot of people with quite a lot of like creative, entrepreneurial, hands-onness flair to them. So it doesn't surprise me at all that lots of different teams are looking at these kind of opportunities. I think also there's a lot of support from the C level for it as well. So even, with all of this work going on, there's been, some great work from different teams. We have an AI toolkit developed by our data privacy team. We have, our AI policy now that has gone in place. We've got the AI training that all of the employees have to do. So everybody's using it in the right way. Nobody's using it, in a risky way. So that everybody's kind of been trained appropriately on how to use it in their day-to-day jobs. But yeah, there's also a lot of really amazing processes at Flow. Flow is ISO accredited for data privacy and securities. It has dual accreditation. So immediately what that means is that there's these kind of watertight processes with DPIA, so data privacy impact assessments going on. Anybody who's using generative AI with a new use case. So everything is done in a very watertight way. So.
It's a world away from some of the organisations that I'm working with at the moment, where it feels like it's slightly done in the dark. It's
Oh,
we should be using AI, but no real questioning around the why. So it's interesting to just hear from a sort of a tech environment just exactly how it is being investigated and used, because as soon as you said everyone's doing their own sort of thing in their own in their own team, my brain started going, "Whoa, stop!" But what you're actually talking about is bringing that together to form a more cohesive whole, which is an
yeah.
interesting approach.
And this is all productivity as well. So these are not like using it to make some new fancy feature on Flow. This is just the optimization of our processes on our workflows,
Mm.
just as making everybody more efficient with their jobs. And I think I went to an AI conference a few months ago, and it feels like this is the same in many tech organizations right now. So, like 90% of the work with generative AI is often on the productivity side, and 10% is fancy new features that might make money. I mean, we can see some of these new features coming to market now. So, I think the two classic examples are Ura. So Ura have a really interesting LLM-based chatbot that has ingested all of your sleep data. And then Strava have done a really interesting LLM as well. So they've got insights they're pulling from your runs, so generative insights coming through. They didn't go with a chatbot, which again is interesting in itself. But you can see if you look at the health tech market, there aren't that many fancy LLM-based features hitting the market, making lots of money. So a lot of people are really focusing on how it can make their organizations more productive and more efficient at the moment.
Yeah, and you're freeing up people's brain power to focus on developing those apps rather than devoting massive amounts of power into meetings or writing up meeting
Yeah,
notes or all of the sorts of things that I think it's useful for in our world. And particularly when it comes to being able to bounce ideas off of a machine. That's how I've found it
yeah.
most helpful, is whether it frees up enough of my time in it working for myself to be able to really delve into the value add. But it seems like that's what it's enabling you to do at Flow.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing to point out is like when you're talking about launching big new LLM powered features as well, is that it is so new as an industry. And when you talk about, oh, how do you measure the clinical safety of an LLM based chatbot, for example, nobody has published any papers on this. Nobody has the playbook for you on like this is how to do this kind of product development. It's all new. So everybody, whenever I talk to people at different, AI based startups, we're all struggling with the same thing, which is that there's no specific way that everybody knows how to do this stuff. Everybody's finding their way with it. We're all trying to do our best. But that is the complexity of developing AI based products. So we've had to think at Flow about what our idea of a medical safety standard is, like what our benchmarks are going to be. So our medical advisors and our chief medical officer putting those in place based on their best knowledge of clinical safety models that operate, I don't know, in the hospital or in surgery. So applying these kind of models from clinical practice to LLMs, and we're doing our best to set those standards and come up with a process where we think is a good way to validate the model in that way. But none of this has been done before. So it all feels like we're doing it all for the first time, and everybody is.
And that's what makes it exciting, doesn't it? And I completely agree. I had the pleasure of spending a bit of time with the King's College, University of London digital health team back in the autumn. And they're doing a lot of problem definition, just as you are at the moment. I mean, even academics who are absolutely up to their necks in this stuff day in, day out are learning how to do it. So you're right. I think that's one of the exciting and also slightly nerve-wracking things about AI, isn't it? We're having to do it and teach ourselves at the same time.
And it's just rapidly changing all the time. I can't believe the advances since we first started this work a year ago.
Mhm.
And I kind of look back and think, oh my goodness, yeah, it's just changed so much with the new models being released, new capabilities like multimodal AI, all of this stuff just within a year. So it's very, yeah, you're dealing with this constantly changing environment as well. So it's very hard doing things like creating a product vision when you don't know what the next thing is going to be to hit the generative AI sector as well. So just a completely different beast to any kind of product development I've ever done before.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So how do you do it? I mean, how do you create a product vision when there are so many balls in the air?
It's very tricky. I wish I had a definitive answer on that. We are trying to use the sort of normal tools for creating visions with like opportunity trees, and dialing it all back to things like user needs and user pain points that we have. But it's difficult because it's changing so rapidly. I mean, I have my own vision of where I hope we're going to get to, but who knows what the next massive breakthrough will be in the next year.
Absolutely. I feel like every time I write something about AI, it's immediately out of date. So much going on. So speaking of change, the other thing that we touched on when we spoke a few weeks back was, you've obviously been with Flow as it's gone on this incredible journey. It's grown so much. I think it's 70 million monthly active users or
Yeah.
something like that. And you've got a real diversity across your user base as well. And I was wondering if you could say a bit more about what that journey's been like for you and some of those growing pains that you've seen as Flow has scaled.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess I came in about like almost 4 years ago. And also back then, Flow was only based really in one country. So on one aspect, Flow itself has changed as an organization just by going, but also from being one office, like one location, to being a company that is across, the UK, Vilnius and Lithuania, Poland, the Netherlands. So, a number of different countries and teams operating remotely. But I think one of the kind of the biggest changes, and I think this affects many from startup to scale up, is the difference from when you're a kind of small, maybe slightly scrappy startup, getting ideas off the ground, quite scrappy, like launching things quite quickly with new ideas, and a lot of that being fairly top down. But to become a scale up, you have to have empowered product teams, and that's the difference. So you can operate that with a small organization. But we're approaching like 500 people, so it cannot be that way. So I think that's the biggest difference, is that over the last number of years, we are now more empowered as product teams. And also, the product teams are way more sophisticated than they were when I first came in. We have, product designers, we have discovery, we have UX research, all content design, all really embedded into product engineering teams. So we have a very well-defined discovery to delivery process. I mean, Flow is still extremely data-driven at its core. I think that is one of the reasons for Flow's success, was that it was incredibly data-driven right from the start, with high volumes of experiments going out. So all the learnings, all the rapid learnings coming in were from experiments. So coupling that data-driven mindset with a product mindset together. And I think the evolution of the organization in that way, and it wasn't easy. I wouldn't say it was easy at all. But now I think we're really mature as a product organization with where we are right now.
And that's so great to hear because it sounds like you've, as an organization, made that move from to becoming more decentralized, to becoming more devolved, but still hanging on to that culture that you talked about, that entrepreneurial culture, but somewhere where people have support as well.
Yeah, I think the culture is quite interesting, because I think the culture of Flow is a reflection of the people who founded it as well. And it's still very, I don't know, pervasive everywhere. And I think at Flow, like, a huge part of the culture is that kind of proactivity and curiosity, and that if you've got an idea, you pitch it and you get some momentum behind it. You can easily, if you've got an idea and you've got some proof that it's going to make some money, brilliant. You're set up probably for a great career at Flow. And it's all about delivery and impact. I think it's very entrepreneurial in a way, the culture here.
That's brilliant. That's really good. And you mentioned a little while ago when we spoke about charities partnering with Flow, and we obviously have lots of charities who listen to this podcast. Is there anything you want to say to the charities who might be listening?
I think there are definitely some opportunities on the science side of the organization. I think that's what I was mentioning to you, Zoe, is that we have a really fantastic science team who do research and who are doing a lot of really interesting women's health research. And I know from my background at Cancer Research UK that there are a lot of charities also doing lots of research and trying to get backing. So I do wonder if there is more of an opportunity for scientific and research collaborations as well. There's also, like I said, there's a lot in our kind of CSR area to do with giving out like Flow Premium in countries which have kind of poorer health infrastructures. So I'm sure our CSR team would be really interested to talk to anybody who's working in women's health in countries where there are high inequalities as well.
That's brilliant. And for the charities who are listening, um, what should they do about contacting Flo if they're interested in either of those things?
If you send me their contact details, I can certainly put them in contact with the right people.
Okay, that sounds good. If anyone is interested in that, just drop me an email on zoe@zoeammer.com and I'll pop my email in the show notes as well. We can connect you to the right people. That sounds great. Thank you, Ali. That's a really helpful offer. So I wanted to finish the interview really by talking about you. And obviously, as someone who's known you for a long time, way back when to when we first met on the CIM back in 2008 or 2009. I think we were debating the dates before the record. One thing I'd love to dive into a little bit actually here was before we began recording today, we talked about how you're a recovering marketer, I'm a recovering marketer, and how that skill set is actually a very transferable one. And Paul, as someone who has done so much work in comms, I'm sure you've got a view on this as well. Um,
Mm.
Tell me a bit about that. What have your marketing skills enabled you to go on and do?
Yeah, well, I think I don't know whether it's still like this because obviously this is rather a long time ago, but the way we learned marketing back in those days, there was a lot to do with user research, user insights, quant, and you did a lot about marketing and even product strategy. I remember in my CIM doing new product development, as it was called back then. And a lot of those skills in new product development are really applicable to being a product manager. And I'd say the same because I went from marketing into an innovation team, which were very trendy in the kind of, I guess, in the 2010s. Many
Yeah.
charities had innovation teams at those stage, and we all actually had quite similar processes as well. And I do think all of those like innovation processes where you were like coming up with ideas and prototyping them and testing them with real users and then doing a pilot. This is not a million miles away at all from doing agile product development what my job is day to day. So the only difference was that back then in the 2010s, we kind of worked in waterfall. so so right, anyway, it's quite bad. We spend, 6 months coming up with a prototype for an idea to test. Probably times have changed since then. But a lot of those kind of core skills from the marketing, from the innovation team, are still skills that I use to this day in my role.
That's so brilliant to hear. I mean, I remember back when we were doing CRM together, I still use some of those skills. I felt that qualification taught me some pretty useful things about strategy and understanding your users and coming up with new ideas. And it's just that now we call them slightly different things, and there are some slightly different processes. But
Yeah.
the core of it still feels quite similar to me.
It does, and then there was some I always because I work very closely with our UX research team at the moment. Even the other day, I was reviewing a discussion guide, and it helps that I've had to write my own discussion guides in the past, because when you're a marketing person by yourself, you do everything. So you write your own discussion guides, you test with your users. Solo product managers are the same. You do everything yourself. So it's often very helpful that you've actually had to run your own research or like run your own discussion. At Cancer Research UK, we had to moderate our own co-creation sessions in the
Wow.
innovation team. So it's like superbly helpful to have done it myself. Hands-on experience, and now actually have a huge privilege to work with people who do all of that for me.
Just giving me visions of rooms full of post-it notes and whiteboards and things like that. And I remember I worked for a major accountancy firm, and at one point they had an innovation team, classic, not hidden away necessarily, but it was in a room, and everyone sort of looked in that room, and on the wall were whiteboards. Post-it notes. You could see product development was going on in there, but it was very, very different to the sort of
Yeah.
the world that was going on around it. And I always liken it to, you can go with the flow and you can adopt those processes and you can understand how those processes work and how they might influence your, as you said, the waterfall side of project management that was sort of more pervasive in the rest of the business. Or it has the reverse effect of being like the antibodies kick in and you go, oh, I must get rid of it. Must get rid of the post-it notes and push it out the door because that's
I
not the way that work gets done around here.
Yeah, but there are problems. I mean, obviously, there are problems with innovation teams as well. So, one of the problems of innovation teams was the fact that they were apart from the business, and Bupa had an
Yeah,
innovation team, when I first joined as well. Apart from the business, work on things in isolation, test it out, then come back to the main business and then try and push it in. Like, take an idea, we've come up with this great idea, think it's amazing. Now, let's deploy it into the care home business. And suddenly, it just goes off the rails, because there are
yeah.
things that have not been thought about. So that was one of the problems with those kind of innovation teams. What I really liked was, so towards my end of my time at Bupa, I was in a ventures team, and this was the gateway drug to me joining Flow, quite honestly, because one of my old bosses started the venture team, and he took a business which was kind of like this fledgling little business that floated around for a little while called Bupa on Demand, and he made it and put it into a sort of startup mentality, agile sprints, me, three engineers in a room, and him, a sales guy and a strategy person, and running this business together like a little mini company, with a budget, with no strings attached to the rest of the business, but we had complete autonomy to run our business, this kind of fledgling little business. And that was brilliant. That is what taught me so much. And without it, I don't think I would have got the job at Flow, quite honestly. It was really fun to just have the autonomy. And I think that's what I missed up until that point in my career, was the real autonomy, and feeling that if it fails, it's on me. If it's a success, brilliant, that's on me. But having that kind of responsibility and autonomy, that's what teaches you to be like a really great product manager.
That's such great advice. Thank you. And to wrap up, Ali, is there any advice you'd give to someone who perhaps has walked the same path of you, but they might be 10 years behind you? What would you say to them?
I'd say that one of the big pieces of advice I think back when looking at my career is to always be your authentic self at work, always, and not to compromise on that. And that if you're in an organization where they continually question who you are, how you behave, that probably suggests that the culture is not right for you and that you're not right for them. And there's no use fighting some of that. It's much better to go and find somewhere where you do gel and your personality fits so well. I'm so happy at Flow because I feel I can be my authentic self here every day. So I wish I'd learnt that lesson sooner. I think when I was younger, I was trying to like force myself into some kind of model or kind of adapt my personality. And I wish I'd kind of known, like, yeah, not to go down that road earlier on. And I think the other thing is to have a think about what matters to you. And once you kind of know that, like, what makes you excited to do your job? For me, honestly, it's exciting to deliver features into production and see results and see impact. Um, and I think for so long, particularly in an organization at Bupa, it's quite hard to deliver things. It takes a really long time. So probably again, until I had that experience at Bupa on Demand, where I was finally like building this and like actually delivering things into a production environment, getting things out, seeing users using our platform, I finally sort of saw how rewarding that was. And that is something that's really important to me. So, it's trying to figure out what is really important to you and what makes you really happy and fulfilled coming to your job every day.
That's such great advice. And that's what we should be teaching kids in school, right? That they need to follow their instincts and their passions and to really understand themselves to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ali. It's been such a joy to talk to you again. And it's been super inspiring hearing about your journey through tech and women's health and leadership. So thank you so much for coming on today to share that.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for
Thank
coming on.
you.
Many thanks to Ali for joining us on the podcast. This is one that we've had ready to go for a while now, so I'm really pleased that we've managed to finally let it see the light of day. And thank you to her for coming on.
Yes, huge thank you to Ali for joining us. I was just fascinated by what she said, and I'm sure our listeners will be as well. And it was so nice to see her again because we actually studied together on the CIM a long time ago, I think back in 2008, 2009. It's brilliant to see her doing so well. And as always, we really do appreciate that you've listened all the way to the end of the episode. Thank you. You can support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us reach more people. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard, do share this episode with a friend.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening today. And we'll see you back. We'll see you in January with a brand new episode of Starts at the Top. If you do celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a fantastic one. And if not, I hope you manage to have a bit of a rest before the new year kicks in.
Happy Christmas, everyone. We'll see you in 2026.
And bye for now.
Bye for now.